Hello, my friends. Our topic is overtones, their power in astrology. I'm going to show you a fascinating kind of planetary configuration in which the planets are connected and then they connect again at an overtone level. And when they connect at a basic level and the overtone level, it makes the impact of that planetary combination, you might say, very rich, very deep, very strong. I'm going to show you an example of this. Of course, let me first explain what an overtone is. The most basic overtone are what we call octaves. And an octave simply means you take something and divide it in half and divide it in half. So, for example, on the left, I have a red line, red horizontal line, and that represents an opposition. So imagine there's a planet on the left. Maybe it's Mars, and on the right is Jupiter. So if Mars was on the left side of this chart wheel and Jupiter on the right side, we would call that an opposition. Of course, they don't have to be horizontal. I just happen to draw it horizontally. Now, what if Mars is on the left side, but Jupiter is above 90 degrees from Mars instead of opposite? So we take the 180 degrees, we cut it in half. When you take an angular distance and cut it in half, that's going up an octave. It's exactly what happens with a string. Like if you have a guitar string and you play half the length of the string, the note goes up one octave. So you play the string open. You just bing, play the string. Then you hold down halfway across and you play half the string. It goes up an octave. And in music, what happens with octaves is it sounds similar. Even though you've gone to a much higher pitch, there's a great similarity. And in astrology, what can happen is the planets could connect in an opposition, and they can also connect as a square. I'm going to show you how this happens. It might sound like, how could it be both opposition and square? I'll show you. Especially it happens when you have three or more planets connected. And when you have three or more planets connected, that's the most important thing. That's a powerful energetic system. And that 3 or 4 or 5 planets, they can reconnect at higher octaves. It's quite fascinating. I'm going to show you an example of this and what I think it means in the person's life. Okay, so on the left, we have that red line showing two planets opposition to each other. Then we cut it in half again, and now we've got 4 pieces of 90 degrees. And this can go on forever. We take the 4 pieces of 90 degrees and we cut them in half. And I've drawn this pink diagonal lines. It's also like a cross, but diagonally, in diagonal directions. And so if we go to the red, pink, and orange lines, we have 8 pieces of 45 degrees. Those are also hard driving aspects. All of these aspects, the opposition, the square, and these multiples of 45 degrees, they're hard, driving, dynamic, moving, fundamental aspects. And you can divide in half again. You can take this 45 degrees from the left side to the pink line going down here, and I put a thin brown line. So that's every 16th of a circle. So we have 1/16, then 2/16 is the same as 1/8. So that's the 1/8 aspect. And then 3/16, you have another brown line here, thin brown line. And then 4/16, which is a square. And then 5/16, another brown line. 6/16, which is the same as 3/8. So when you divide in half again, you get some new aspects. And of course, you're repeating some of the existing ones. And I went one more with a very faint, thin gray line. You can barely see it, where I divide it again into 30 seconds. And you can go to 64, it's 128, 256, you can keep dividing. And we found from our research, this goes up into the 300s and 400s, believe it or not. And we've done detailed statistical analysis showing, for example, people with bipolar disorder have planetary combinations going up into very high vibrations. This sounds a little crazy and bizarre to a lot of astrologers. They say, you know, keep it simple. But we don't get to decide how astrology works. And the research shows that this is how it works. Now, what I'm going to show you in this video is an example of 4 planets connecting at a basic vibration and then reconnecting at an octave and making it very strong. I'm going to show you an example from my own chart just to illustrate how this works. So, I write little tunes. It's you can see the guitar back there in the background. It's just a hobby. I've done this my whole adult life, just write little songs. And I like to use images, comes up periodically, of things like snow and crystals, things like this glistening, glittering. You know, I love snow when it's like in a wooded area and it's glistening. These images keep popping up over and over again. Things that are like pristine and pure. So images of snow, crystals, and purity are common in my song lyrics. In extreme case sampling research, we found that Vesta was related to this. So this inclination to like certain kinds of things, you know, whatever kind of style we're drawn to, is something fundamental to the way we're perceiving life and the way we're functioning. So I would suspect that I have a strong Vesta, this emphasis on purity and like cleanliness and snow and crystals and all this kind of stuff. And what I'm going to show you is how Vesta connects with 3 other planets at a really basic level, and then again at this higher octave. And because the emphasis for me is on things that are glittering and shiny and sparkling and moving, I'm thinking Vesta, Uranus. And I look at my chart and bam, there it is. And again, what makes it really interesting is the way it repeats at the higher octaves. Because a lot of times we can make sense of an astrology chart. We say, like I do have Uranus opposition Vesta. And you can just say, wow, look at that. He has Uranus opposition Vesta. I'll show you that in a second. But why does it not work for everyone? You know, a lot of people are going to have Uranus in a hard aspect to Vesta. They're not all into snow and, you know, whatever. And we say, oh, well, it's the way you were brought up and blah, 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 a bunch of other things. You have to look at the whole chart. But why are that specific aspects working differently? Well, here we'll see that it gets repeated at these higher octaves. And this is one of the beautiful things about vibrational astrology, is you don't say, oh, well, this didn't work for you, and then find a bunch of other things in the chart to explain it. You can look at the planetary configuration and understand it on its own terms. Nothing else in the chart is going to destroy that energy. The energy is there. It's not going to destroy that planetary configuration. So anyway, it's very simple. If there's Uranus Vesta, it will lead to this kind of interesting, glittering things like crystals and so on. But it has to be strong to really show up clearly, and, you know, as a strong interest of the person. And so it shows up very, very clearly. So let me show it to you. Let me show you the planetary configuration in my chart. So let me drag this up a little bit. Okay, there we go. All right, and yeah, that looks good. Just making sure everything is in the captured window. Okay, good. All right, there's my birth chart, and I put Vesta in. There's Vesta at 26 Sagittarius 46. It is opposition Uranus with a slightly over 1 degree orb. Now, in vibrational astrology, we would say, wow, well, that's interesting, but it's just 2 planets, and it shouldn't be that dominant or obvious like it is in me. So what's going on here? Well, first thing we'll notice is if we go to the midpoints, and let me zoom this in a little bit. Okay, that's as far as it'll zoom. Okay, just to make that a little bit bigger. And what you'll notice is this, and I'll pull up a pop-up wheel. what you'll notice is, well, let me skip the pop-up wheel, that's fine, is what we'll notice is that, I put Vesta in here, is that Vesta is at the Sun-Pluto midpoint, 37 minutes. And Uranus is at the Sun-Pluto midpoint, 29 minutes. So going back to the chart wheel, this Uranus opposition Vesta is falling right in between the Sun and Pluto. And also, there are some hard aspects going on here. The Sun and Pluto are very, very weakly, well, you may not think it's so weak, 3.5 degree orb, but Sun is square Pluto, and Sun is sesquiquadrat. You see this red line here? Not super thick because it's not super strong, but Sun is aspected to Vesta. And we do have a semi-square from Uranus to Pluto. What I'm explaining is that Sun, Uranus, Pluto, and Vesta are tied together in two fundamental ways. First of all, Uranus and Vesta are at this symmetry point right in between Sun and Pluto with about 0.5 degree orb. That's strong. So we have Uranus Vesta. That's going to be this bright, glittering sense, like, I lived in North Florida for a while. It does hardly ever snows there. Moved up north and God, I saw snow again and the sun was on and it's glittering. This kind of thing. And it plays a part. I'm going to actually play one of my little songs for you in a moment. Just a corny little tune. It gives you the feeling of what I'm talking about, this Uranus Vesta at Sun Pluto. A sense of like purpose or mission about it. And then there are also second point, so you have the symmetry, and there's making weak aspects. Now what really triggers this and leads to the bringing my attention into it. Let me start the song, okay? Make this a little concrete for you. So here's a song I wrote close to 50 years ago, and I added some new parts to it yesterday. I'm saying clear as crystal, white as snow. White as snow. I wrote this 50 years ago, before I knew anything about Vesta in my chart. Okay. So I'm talking about water glistening in the sun and all this stuff. So where does this interest, can we see this orientation in the person's chart? What I'm saying is that I believe, and this can sound wild, that this Uranus-Vesta opposition in my chart at the Sun-Pluto midpoint is working on me and leading me to use these images and write little tunes about it. If that's true, that's just mind-blowing. So I'll play it one more time just so you get the feeling of it while I'm talking, and then leave, just only play it one more time. So clear as crystal, white as snow. Now, let me show you how this gets reinforced at a higher octave. Okay, let me go back to my PowerPoint. Where's my PowerPoint? Like a mountain stream in the sun glistening. Okay, you got the idea. I think I'm going to... Well, it's almost done. I'll let it finish. Okay, so in my natal chart, Uranus is opposition Vesta, and I have equals Sun-Pluto means Sun-Pluto midpoint. Those are the orbs. And there are weak 4 vibe, it means square, and 8 vibe means dividing circle by eighths. So that makes it strong. Now let me show you the overtones. This is quite fascinating. Okay, the music's almost over, so I'm not talking over it. Okay. So to repeat, what I'm saying is that inclination to this sparkly stuff is actually in the chart. The tastes, the orientation, working. And what happens with an asteroid like Vesta is if it connects to two other planets, gets woven into an existing planetary configuration, it adds a tone to it. The asteroids by themselves, we haven't found them to be that important, but when they combine together with an important planetary configuration, they change the tone of it. So without Vesta, going back to my chart real quickly, you have Uranus making weak aspects to Sun and Pluto, and at the midpoint, Uranus, Sun, Pluto, dynamic, spontaneous, this kind of thing, and you might say off on their own thing, just spontaneous and a little bit revolutionary, you might say. But you put in Vesta to color it a little bit, and what is that revolution about? Something refined or pure. In either a positive or negative way. It could be all prim and proper, which we don't think of as Uranus and Sun, Pluto, but it explains a lot about how this is working. Even the purity and elegance of vibrational astrology is like this crystalline idea of the universe, and how there's this intricate, beautiful, it's like they're beautiful gems, like beautiful, intricate crystals that we live in. Okay. Let me show you the overtones. Go back to the PowerPoint. Let's look at the 8 vibration chart. What the 8 vibration chart is going to do is it's going to take this sesquiquadrat, this 3/8 aspect, turn it into a conjunction, a rather weak conjunction because the aspect's not that strong. The Uranus and Pluto will show up. So that, we already know that's going to happen. But a very cool thing happens to the overtones, which I'll show you. Here's the 8 vibration chart. And as expected, there's Vesta, Uranus, and Pluto close together, and the Sun. So let me show you that configuration again in the natal chart. We're talking about Uranus, Vesta, and Sun, Pluto. So it's Sun, Uranus, Pluto, and Vesta. And in the 8 vibration chart, as expected, there are the 4 planets, Sun, Vesta, Uranus, and Pluto. And they're not super tight, they're spread out a little bit. Well, first of all, another planet gets involved, Venus, but mainly just to Pluto, because I have Venus square Pluto in my natal chart, so that's a little bit. But this is what's fascinating when you look at the midpoint structures, because in the birth chart, it's Sun and I keep saying that wrong. It's Uranus and Vesta at Sun, Pluto. Now let's look at the midpoint structures in the 8 vibration chart. Vesta is at Sun, Uranus. Oh my God. The same 3 planets, the Sun, Uranus, and Vesta, are forming a midpoint structure again in 8 vibe. And Uranus is at Pluto Vesta, but that one's weaker at 41 minutes. And yeah, those are the 2. A little bit weaker, but still, it's there. It's under a degree warp. Remember, we're talking about Sun, Uranus, Pluto, and Vesta. Those 4 planets tied together in the natal chart are tied together again in the 8 vibration. And what happens is this. Vesta at Sun, Uranus, when we look at this chart wheel, it just works out that they're equally spread. The distance between them is about the same. The Sun, 25 Aquarius, to Vesta at 4 Pisces, that's about 9 degrees. 4 Pisces to 13 Pisces is also 9 degrees. They're both very, very close to being exactly 9 degrees apart. So what happens is this. Here's like the final point. You have a planetary configuration. And if those planets spread out equally, they just distribute in a certain way, they can reconnect in a higher vibration. the aspects are actually weak. The Uranus opposition Vesta in the natal chart is about 1 degree orb, not that weak, but it's not a super tight configuration. It's basically a strong midpoint structures with fairly weak aspects, but then it gets reinforced at 8 vibration and look at the orb on this one. Vesta's at Sun Uranus midpoint, 10 minutes. In vibrational astrology, our rule is that once you get under 15 minutes, it's extremely powerful. So I hope you can feel what I'm saying is, let me try to give you an intuitive feeling for it, is that we look at the natal chart, we see Uranus Vesta at Sun Pluto. Wow, this guy is like, very dynamic, almost revolutionary for something like pure and pristine or something, which anybody who knows me knows it shows up in a lot of ways, like my diet and all kinds of things. So, I have, people think I must have like tons of Virgo or something, but this is what it is, this Uranus Vesta at Sun Pluto, part of it. But what makes it really strong is appearing again in an higher octave. It's like you were playing a musical note on an instrument and it has a very strong overtone, an octave higher. It makes it richer, like a more resounding, stronger effect. So that's it. And I think that that's what is fueling, you might say, energizing this inclination to a lot of things that are very much like Vesta. When we were doing the research on Vesta, Michelle Love was leading that research, and she did a presentation on her findings, and several of us were working, assisting in that research. And I just thought, well, what is Vesta doing in mine? It must be like electrified. What is it doing in my chart? A certain kind of Vesta. And there it is, exactly in the way I thought. And one of the things we like to do with vibrational astrology is to have greater confidence. Like, why does a planetary configuration show up in a very particular way for a particular person? And not just say, well, we don't know, or it's their environment. If you look closely enough, and as we discover more, it's actually in the chart for exactly why Vesta takes on a certain quality and a strength and you might say power to it. Okay, I think that's basically it. Let me go back to the PowerPoint, see if there's anything else I want to mention. So I already said this, the planets happen to be evenly spread out in 8 vibration. Okay, makes the energetic or the pattern connection of the Sun, Uranus, Pluto, Vesta, that 4 planets, very, very strong, especially the Vesta Sun Uranus, because that's the one with the very tight orb in 8 vibration. And in fact, that makes perfect sense. So the rule is, just to repeat this, if the same planets, not different planets, they connect in an overtone, especially in octave. I'll talk about other overtones, in other situations. So if they connect, like they are here, it just adds richness, strength, and depth to that planetary configuration. And I put here for nerds only. These are the angular distances in the natal chart. If you wanted to analyze this in great detail, we don't need to do that. These vibrational charts and everything, all you have to know is what I told you. But if you're like to get into the fine numbers, I made some notes here. You can pause this and work your way through it and see what's going on. So there it is, kind of highlighted a little bit. When planetary positions are equally spread in just the right way, you get additional resonance at an overtone, tremendously increasing the impact of the planetary configuration. Okay, I think that's it. Okay, that's it. So I want to thank you if you're a subscriber, if you're a member. Thank you so much. There's information here on how to become a member, and even just being a subscriber really helps us tremendously to get this information out. I know people constantly telling me how much they appreciate that I've made over 700 videos, all this for free, and then also with membership, available inexpensively once or twice a month, depending on whether you do the gold membership or the platinum membership. All this out there. The more people we have engaged and involved, the more reasonable it is and easier it is for me to be able to do all this for, inexpensively and even for free. So thank you so much for watching. I'm going out with that little tune that I think is actually, imagine, could it be that writing these little tunes and these images influenced by that planetary configuration? I actually think it is, which is amazing. Okay, my friends, thank you very much for listening. God bless. Namaste.